discuss and try and answer questions. But to set the context, I thought I'll share a few concrete examples and try and derive some uh, principles or learnings out of those examples. So with that, let me take you to my first slide. Here you find four photographs. One is of Eliud Kipchoge. The second is Commander Abhilash Tomy. And the third is Alex Honnold. And the fourth is Zempo Shimabukuro. These are all people who've met the hero within. And that's why I thought I'll share a little bit about each one of them and then try and see what's common. And you will notice that each one of them is from a vastly different field. In fact, I deliberately chose these four exemplars because their fields are so diverse. In the normal course of our lives, we would never meet somebody like them. And so I thought diversity is the key to understanding the hero within. Let's take a look at Eliud Kipchoge. Eliud Kipchoge is arguably the world's greatest marathoner. In fact, a lot of people consider him to be the greatest marathoner in the history of marathon running, at least in the modern era. And no human being has hitherto been expected to run a marathon in under 2 hours. And yet here he was, Eliud Kipchoge, on the 12th of October 2019, he ran a marathon under controlled conditions. It was an endeavor by a lot of people, science, technology, fellow runners, hosts, and all kinds of people coming together to help Eliud Kipchoge break a barrier that was considered hitherto impossible for the human species. Just like Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile barrier way back. Until Bannister broke that barrier, it was considered impossible to run a mile in under 4 minutes. And yet, Roger Bannister did it in 3 minutes, 59.57 seconds. And what is interesting is, within 1 month of Bannister breaking that barrier, an Australian runner named Landy, John Landy, I think it was, within a month, also ran the mile under 4 minutes. So the learning there is that there is an impossible standard, but once someone breaks that limit, many others follow, because the human species learns that that barrier is breakable, and therefore that works on the psyche of other people who start believing that they too can do it, and then the barrier just is blown apart. And I think Eliud Kipchoge's historic sub-2 marathon on the 12th of October 2019 falls in this category. And I fully expect many more runners to start running sooner than later. The marathon, which is 26 miles, approximately 42 kilometers. I'm expecting more people as we go along in the next few years to run below 2 hours. And Eliud Kipchoge ran this marathon in 1 hour, 59 minutes, 40 seconds. And I'll show I'll play a brief clip here just to give you an idea of the speed at which this Kenyan is flying over the marathon course. Take a look. So, um, Eliud Kipchoge is running at about 4 minutes and 26 seconds um, for a mile, for 26 miles. Just imagine the speed and the stamina and the consistency with which he is constantly maintaining that speed. Impossible, or so we believe, until Eliud Kipchoge actually did it. Now let's take a look at Alex Honnold. Alexander Honnold is a young man and he's a rock climber and he's famous for his free solo. And it's interesting. Free soloing is climbing without any rope, harness, or safety equipment. So if you make a mistake, you die because you're climbing huge mountains and rock faces without any safety equipment, without anything to hold you up. So if you miss your footing, that's it. You become history. Now, Alex Honnold in 2017 climbed El Capitan in the Yosemite National Park in the US. And this is considered to be one of the greatest athletic achievements of all time. It's an unbelievable feat that he did. Take a look at Alex climbing without ropes, without any safety harness. If he loses his finger hold and toe hold, he falls. And that's the end of Alex. And here he is on what is called the enduro corner of this mountain, El Capitan. El Capitan is this vertical granite wall, 3,000 feet in height. And here he is on the enduro corner, which is one of the most crucial, dangerous parts of his climb. He's at this point about 2,500 feet high up in the air. Again, without safety equipment. Oops. And now, oops, there's some technical problem. Let me try and fix it. Uh, can you see the screen now? Can you?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Now this is Hanshi Zempo Shimabukuro. Hanshi is the title given to a 10th Dan black belt. And a person who's achieved a 10th Dan black belt is one of the living gods of karate. There are very, very, very few people, maybe 4 or 5 of them. Uh, he's 77 years old now. And this was taken a couple of years ago. So I think at age 75 or so. And this is just a 2-minute video. And he is doing what we call in karate a kata, which is a series of stylized movements to defend and attack. Karate is essentially for self-defense. So there'll always be a defense against an imaginary enemy, followed by a very powerful attack. And that's a kata. It's a series of stylized movements, and there are different kinds of katas. And you need to know all these things thoroughly. But here is Hanshi Zempo Shimabukuro doing what we call the kusanku. The kusanku kata by Zempo Shimabukuro. I just paused it for a moment just to let you know that if you listen very closely, you can hear the canvas cracking with the speed, like a whiplash. That's how fast and powerful his movements are. And my friends, karate is not just physical. Truly evolved karateka like Hanshi Zempo Shimabukuro always stresses that karate is not physical. It's mental and spiritual. The body is merely an instrument to carry out the purpose of the mind and the spirit. Commander Abhilash Tommy is one of those incredible Indians who all of us are so proud about. He's a winner of the Kirti Chakra, Nausena Medal, and he's a yachtsman par excellence. In 2013, he became the first Indian to complete, mark my words very carefully, a solo, non-stop circumnavigation of the world under sail without a motor. And he also competed in the 2018 Golden Globe race. Now it's important to understand, this was solo, non-stop, without power. And for him to qualify and get this circumnavigation certification, he was not allowed to take help from anyone or anything. He could not even take a bottle of water from a passing ship. That was the stringent condition of this whole sailing expedition. And just to put it in context, the achievement, 562 people have reached space. Over 3,100 human beings have climbed to the summit of Mount Everest. Commander Abhilash Tomy is only the 79th human being to circumnavigate solo, unassisted, non-stop. Just imagine the scale of this achievement. He is only the 79th human being in the history of all mankind to have done this. So, what's common to all of them? I've been spending a lot of time trying to think, what could have made all these people achieve some of these things which are defying even descriptions and imaginations of all of us? What's common? And the answer is clarity of their ideal self. If you looked closely at each one of them, and if you followed them, you'll find an absolute stillness within themselves that comes from having great knowledge about who they really are, their ideal self. That clarity is defined within their consciousness. And when I say clarity, it means clarity of who they want to be physically, who they want to be emotionally, who they want to be mentally, and who they want to be on a temporal basis in the material world. They have seen who they can be. And right there in the middle of it, they are deeply aware of their spiritual consciousness. They're deeply aware they are part of this infinite manifestation that all spiritual traditions call God, and that God is manifest within them. And all this knowledge of their ideal self has given them that strength and unflappable equanimity. Like Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, Sangam Tyaktva Dhananjaya, Asidhya, Asidhya Samo Bhutva, Samatvam Yoga Uchyate. Samatvam, balance. If you notice, all of them, in everything they do, they are in perfect balance. Physically, mentally, emotionally, temporally. In every way, they are balanced. That's because they have seen who they can be, the perfect self that they can be, and they spend every in-breath and out-breath taking one step towards that ideal self. And that is what helps them scale pinnacles that the rest of us can only dream about. And yet, each one of us, each one of us can do many such things also. Which then brings me to the story of King Puranjana. And this is a story from the Bhagavatam. And this is a story as told to King Prachina Barhis by sage Narada. There was this King Puranjana who was seeking happiness always. He wanted to be very hedonistic. Uh, but he had a very affectionate friend by his side always. But Puranjana was kind of not paying enough attention to this affectionate friend who was with him all the time. And Puranjana was always seeking to find happiness. He wanted to settle down in a beautiful town. And he went from town to town searching for this place, but couldn't find it. Finally, on the southern foothills of the Himalayas, he found this town with 9 gates. There were beautiful gardens and flowers and decorations. And it was all owned by a very beautiful lady. He married this lady. And this town with beautiful gardens and flowers had a 5-headed serpent which was guarding the whole city. And he settled down there. But as happens to all of us, happiness is temporary. Soon he was attacked and killed by Durbhaga, the daughter of Yama. And Yama's army, which had warriors, fearsome warriors like illnesses and worries, attacked him, killed him, because he had forsaken his friend for his wife, children, and temporal pursuits. And even though he had all these wonderful aspects in his life, he just couldn't withstand the onslaught of time, worries, disease, and old age. But there's a deeper significance to this. And this is the teaching of Narada. Seeking happiness always. And who is this affectionate friend always by his side? Is the Lord himself. And which is this town with 9 gates in the southern foothills of the Himalayas? It's an allegory for the body. It's a metaphor for the body. The body is considered to be a town with 9 gates. And what about these beautiful gardens and flowers and decorations guarded by a 5-headed serpent? That's prana and the 5 senses. And he, the king Puranjana, was attacked and killed by Durbhaga, daughter of Yama, old age and death. And so, when Prachina Barhis was sitting at the feet of sage Narada, Prachina Barhis, the king, much later, asked Narada, what is the significance of the story? And that's when sage Narada narrated all this to him and finally said, the ultimate teaching is conquer yourself and everything around you by chanting the Lord's name constantly. This is what is going to help you transcend material, temporal problems and the fear of death itself. So every spiritual tradition teaches that the infinite is within. The Lord resides within. That's why he is called Purusha, one who lives within the Pura, that is the town with 9 gates. The indweller who lives in this town with 9 gates. Therefore, by definition, if the Lord is within every one of us, every human being has infinite capabilities. Every one of us has infinite capabilities. So here, we've got to ask ourselves, first of all, have we ever looked inside to understand that magnificent indweller. And if we have not, can we start doing that now? Firstly. And secondly, if the indweller is infinite, it follows that potential is infinite too. Therefore, can we start believing? We've got to believe. St. Augustine very famously said, Father Matthew can correct me if I'm wrong. St. Augustine famously said, Credo autem telegam. Believe and you shall perceive. St. Augustine says, for example, that you need to have faith that God exists. When you have faith, you will see his manifestations everywhere. So you have to believe. And when you believe that you have infinite capabilities, then you will start seeing possibilities which you never saw earlier. Because what's out there is in here. And what's manifesting outside is the result of what goes on within the city with 9 gates in here. The toxicity that you say outside, whether it is in the environment or in terms of interpersonal relationships, begins inside. It's because inside us we are toxic, that toxicity spews outside in the form of words and actions that pollute the external environment. So everything is within here, inside us. And if you realize that we are the manifestation of divinity, we understand in a flash that we are infinite beings and we can be infinite in anything we do. We can make a big difference, not only to ourselves, but to everybody around us. And so, chapter 10, verse 25 of the Bhagavad Gita says, Krishna says, Maharshi Nam Bhriguraham Giram Asmi Ekam Aksharam Yajnanam Japa Yajno Asmi Sthavaranam Himalaya. What he says is, of the great sages, I am the perfection, the perfect sage, Bhrigu. Of all the vibrations, I am the perfect transcendental vibration, Om. Of all the yajnas and sacrifices, I am the chanting of the holy names, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And of all the immovable things, the perfection of all the immovable things is the Himalayas, and I am the Himalayas. And you know, that is exactly what he's telling us, that each one of us is a perfect manifestation of him, of divinity. It's just that in the course of our temporal existence, like King Puranjana, we have been swept away by the externals, and we live virtually 99% in the external world without even peeping inside ourselves to understand what great capabilities lie there. So, whether it's Alex Honnold or Commander Abhilash Tommy or Hanshi Zenpo Shimabukuro or Eliud Kipchoge, or indeed anybody who's done things we can't comprehend, they're all aware of this internal manifestation of the power and capability. So if we want, we can understand this in a flash. It doesn't take time. It's just a reorientation of our vision, which is focused today externally. If we turn the spotlight and focus it internally, we then start seeing capabilities that we never knew existed. Age no bar. Age no bar. And I'll round off by sharing the story of the beggar and the biscuit tin. and then we'll come to discussions and questions. There was this beggar sitting on a street corner, and he was sitting on this old biscuit tin, these big Murray biscuit tins. It was an empty biscuit tin, and he was using it as a stool, and he was sitting there and putting his hand out, begging for alms from all the passers-by. And he was sitting there for hours and hours, extending his arms uh, to beg for alms. And so there was this bystander who saw him sitting there for many, many hours, day after day. So he went out of curiosity and asked the beggar, "Who are you? Where are you from? Why are you sitting here?" And the beggar said, "I'm here to feed myself and my family. I have no skills, I have no opportunities. So I just want to collect alms from whoever will share a little bit with me so that I can feed my family." And then the bystander said, "You're sitting on this tin. Uh, all these days you've been sitting on this tin. Uh, what's in the tin?" So the beggar looks at him very quizzically and says, "What a strange question. I have never even thought about it. I've never looked what inside." So the passerby says, can we look inside that tin?" And so they opened the lid, and lo and behold, within that biscuit tin on which this beggar has been sitting and begging for alms, within that tin is great treasure, huge amount of gold and silver. And that's enough for the beggar for the rest of his life, not only for one generation, for many generations. He found the treasure, and all this while, he was sitting on the treasure without realizing the kind of treasure that he had with him. And that is my condition and perhaps yours. We have all been sitting on this treasure, but we have been looking away and outside, not looking inside. If only we look inside, we'll find the treasure. And once we find the treasure, we can set goals, and little by little, we can polish ourselves so that our ideal self comes into view. Just like Michelangelo chipped away all the extra marble from this beautiful translucent block of marble. And when Michelangelo chipped away all the extra marble from this fabulous translucent block of marble, when the extra marble fell off, the immortally beautiful, sublime beauty of the Pieta came into view. And that is the most beautiful statue of Mother Mary in the world. So all we need to do is to chip away all this encrustations of the external world for our ideal self to come into view. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Father. Can I take in questions? We would also like to hear from you about, you have talked about the external world and being steeped in it. Would we also like to talk about your own personal experience in dealing, chipping away the marble in some of or helping them to chip away the marble and to see the true selves, to come closer to the true self?
Yeah, my personal journey began actually more or less at the age of 38 or 39. So I have this very clear phase of life before this and after this. At the age of 38 or 39, one evening, I was rushed into the ICU. I was on the verge of having a heart attack. And I was sitting in my chair and I became unresponsive. And hospital authorities were called. They rushed in with the wheelchair and took me straight into the ICU. And they told me that I was in the process of having a heart attack. I had not yet had a heart attack, and they were able to prevent it by giving me the requisite drugs. And then they told me that you had a narrow escape, and you need to do an angiogram. So 10 days later, I was taken to the hospital in Chennai. An angiogram was done, and the surgeon who did the angiogram started laughing when he was doing the angiogram. He said, "Madhav, why are you here? There's no problem at all. There's absolutely no block." And that made sense because I was physically very active. I was a serious tennis player. I was in, doing a whole lot of physical training, all kinds of stuff I was doing. Even on the day that I had this problem, I had gone for my training in the morning. So he laughed and said, "There's nothing wrong with you. There is no block." So then what happened? What happened? And then the doctor told me later, I'm anyway a vegetarian. I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I'm physically extremely active. So what happened? He said, what has happened to you is that your coronary artery went into a kind of a cramp and your artery just about kind of closed. Why? Short answer, stress, which came directly from living in the external world so much. Not at all able to relate to me inside. I was out in the external world doing all kinds of things, rotary and work and this, and writing and speaking, this and that and everything. Huge amounts of work and stress. And because of the stress, my artery just kind of closed. And I must tell you, Professor Raja, my personal growth happened when I was connected up to those wires and tubes in the ICU. And I have no hesitation in saying that is the best thing that ever happened to me. Because it was as though a switch had been flipped. Paradigm shift happened in my life. And the best years of my life ensued thereafter. Because I realized that 90% of the stuff that I was chasing is worthless anyway. And so I started focusing on internal balance, stillness, thought, and so on.
Thank you. Yeah.
I have a
Yes.
question, Professor Raja.
Yeah. Yes.
So to
Please come in, Father.
yes, it was so fascinating, Madhav Mohan sir, listening to the hero within, and also your personal experience of connected with the wires and tubes that made you to jump out of those boundaries and to spiritually connect with the whole universe and moving towards the spiritual. So you were speaking from a great spiritual foundation rather than natural or worldly wisdom, but someone who had gone through deeply into this spiritual animation and with a foundation to a rock of foundation. So since I am from the Christian tradition, we have the Jewish tradition where we see that, God as the absolute positive. So there are situations in the Old Testament where the Jewish people, they were in peril, like the Exodus. They were in slavery, and from Egypt. They were crying, and then there is Moses, and Moses himself was saying that, I am stammering, I am very feeble, and then he was made the leader, and then he was breaking the Red Sea and crossing over, and then giving a great leadership. Then we also see that there is David. David was able to, he was simply, even to his father, he was nobody. When Prophet Samuel came to him and to his family, his father Jesse, and asked, "Where are your children?" And then, he brought everyone except the last one. And then, is there anyone? Oh, the last one, he is a small boy, and he never considered him as somebody. And then seeing him, then he anointed, and then he was capable of killing Goliath. So that way we see that, the immense possibilities and the potentialities have been taken. And through the history, we could also see that Joan of Arc, a simple lady, and then in the 20th century, Mother Teresa, who was from Albania, and then how a very small, tiny figure, how she was capable of doing such a great marvelous. So as you were saying, the purposiveness is very important, and who was giving this purpose, and that foundation. And my question is, um, now we see great mentors and management gurus speaking in terms of worldly wisdom rather than any spiritual animation, and then they don't believe in any kind of spiritual strength. So I think there are many and many more, and then you might be somebody who was very special. So to the large extent of this management experts who are bringing in worldly wisdom, how they have responded to this spiritual animation and the divine within, the manifestations of the within. Have you encountered conflicts with them, and how they have also pushed you down, saying that these are all bullshit?
Um, Thank you, Father. What a perceptive question. And uh, yeah, you're so right, Um, let's look at, okay, let's look at management per se. Management has everything to do with organizations. And what is an organization? According to me, an organization is a conglomeration or an aggregation of a set of human beings who are living organisms. So if human beings are living organisms, the sum total, I mean, when everybody is working together, the technical term is synergy. If human beings are all together and they are living organisms, then the sum total of human beings also should be an organism which is alive. And therefore, by definition, spirituality is the central pillar of any organization, not profit. I always say, of course, that profit is to an organization what oxygen is to an organism. But beyond the profit lies the spiritual manifestation of this cosmic power. The organization is also an organism created by His divine dispensation. And it is this organization, this organism, that has gone berserk and polluted the world so much that the Thwaites Glacier is melting, that the Siberian crater is increasing in depth at the rate of 46 feet per year. And soon many of Northern Europe's buildings will become seismologically unstable because the earth is caving in under them, because the Siberian permafrost is melting. It's these organisms which have metastasized, how do you say it? Metastasized in such a way, I don't know, Professor Raja, you can help me. How do you pronounce it? Metastasis. In such a way, I mean, grown uncontrollably along this one narrow dimension of just profit to the exclusion of everything else, that the whole system has become destabilized. So there has to be a spiritual foundation for organization. That is because leadership is essentially based on spirituality, and leadership is the core of organizations. Number one. Number two, yeah, the minute you talk about the spiritual aspects to managers, initially there's a shock, then there is irritation, and finally, as Gandhiji said, they'll fight you and then you win. Because it's not you. The spiritual principles are eternal and immutable and applicable under all circumstances. And people begin to realize, and I have always also found that the minute that you explain or quote the Bible or the Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is electricity in the room, because there's some force there acting through you to make people understand the essential unity of everyone and everything, which is what teamwork and collaboration really is all about. That is how synergy flows. And yes, conflicts are my middle name, because there's always a conflict of expeditious steps versus honesty and integrity. And when your base inside is strong, no external gale force can knock you off. So if you are adhering to eternal principles of honesty and integrity, and you stand for certain values, then the temptation of a little money here and there, or some extra power in your role, will never affect you. This will be like, like the shield, like the Spartans had the phalanx with shields. The shield that protects you is awareness of your values. Awareness of values leads to acceptance of those values, which then leads to clarity of action. So, you have clarity of thought. In a given situation, if your values are clear, then you know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And 99% of the people have this problem. In a given situation, they're confused. If you have values clarity, there is no scope for confusion. You know clearly what to do. That which helps you adhere to your values, you will do. That which takes you away from the values, you will not do. It's very binary. So that's how I've been able to manage with, deal with conflicts. And conflicts are all the time. In my earlier days, I mean, before I had this health issue and the change, my favorite way of dealing with conflict was to either hit someone physically or evaporate him and eviscerate him by words. And I was infamous for that. But after this, I know that people will fight, and Just because somebody says something doesn't mean it's true. And you know, anyway, you can kill him with one blow. So you don't hit him at all. And you don't need to prove anything to anyone because you're going by your own internal guidance, which is the value system. So that's a very clear way of living, I think. I'm sorry if I rambled a bit too much.
No, no, sir.
Yeah,
Splendid answer. Excellent. Great to hear.
yeah. We can take on more questions. A few more questions. Because when you talked about profits, Madhav, that is the old saying of Peter Drucker, that the purpose of business is not profits. The profit is a consequence and not the purpose. But most people forget that. If you're driven purely by your quarterly results uh, and all your activities center around that, then of course you forget all these maxims.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Absolutely right. It's like, if you see in many places, if you go to a gym, you will see many bodybuilders who have huge upper body strength, huge muscles on their biceps, triceps, shoulders. They're very powerfully built in their upper body, but the lower body is not developed. They have spindly legs. They don't have power in the rest of their body. Their center of gravity is not low. They're not stable in their stance and they will topple over anytime. They don't have stamina. That's because of lopsided development. So focusing only on profits, on Q results, as you said, it's like that. See, this is why we are talking about the triple bottom line today. This is why profits is a necessary condition but not sufficient. You need to have sustainability, which brings me to my definition of leadership. My personal definition of leadership is just 3 words: ensuring sustainable results. That's what leadership is all about. So, sustainability means balanced, all round, going beyond just the EBITDA. EBITDA is important, but you have to go beyond. And cash is important, all important, but you have to go beyond. Why? The question is why cash? There has to be a reason why. And that answer to that question is what leads you to this all-round balanced spiritual evolution.
And organizations also, just like the story that Narada had related, organizations also, as they grow, might tend to forget uh, the friend who's been responsible for their growth, which
Yeah.
is one's own inner self. And
Oh, absolutely.
might the sheer success might result in that.
Yeah. Yeah. When you see all these top government officials and people who are in positions of power, big corporate executives, entrepreneurs who are multi-billion dollar, who are multi-billionaires, a lot of the time their ego comes into the room 2 or 3 hours before they come into the room. Uh, and along the way they have forgotten the path that they have trodden and how they've got here. This is precisely why Krishna teaches us in the Gita. He says, Rasoham apsu kaunteya prabhasmi shashi suryayo pranavas sarva vedeshu shabda khe paurusham yishu. It's a fabulous teaching. It says, Rasoham apsu kaunteya. He says, I am the taste in the water. Apsu is water. I am the taste in the water. He's not saying I am water. I am the taste in the water. Prabhasmi Shashi Suryayo. I am the light in the sun and the moon. Pranava Sarva Vedeshu Shabda. I am the word Om, which you will find in all the Vedas, which is the core of the Vedas. I am the word Om, the Shabda Om. K, that is either. I am the ether in space. And then is that classic phrase, Paurusham Rishu. That means I am the competence in man. He's not saying I am in man. He's saying I am the competence in man. That means I am the one who has imbued you with your knowledge, your wisdom, your skills, your talents, your strengths. Everything that you have done is me acting through you. It's not you, my friend. It's me who is making you do these things. I am the competence that flows out of your mind and your body and through your finger dexterity and mental alacrity. And people who are living in the external world are not aware of this. So they think that all the success is due entirely to them. And they're heading for a huge fall.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, Chandran, please come in.
Uh,
This is your area, in fact.
I find that your spiritual interpretation of management is excellent. I have been saying this for a long time,
Wonderful.
trainer. But now I find none of the Institute of Managements have a subject on spirituality at all. If you don't teach them in the school, how do you expect them to practice it in the corporate world? That's the sheer fatal flaw in the educational system.
Thank you, sir. That's so true. You know, a few years ago, I was participating in a seminar along with a very famous Swamiji, who was a great exponent of the Gita. And so, in my little knowledge of Gita, I quoted a few words here and there. And he was looking askance at me. And he was wondering, you know, what a lay person had to do with the Bhagavad Gita. But in that seminar, I said, you know, look at the average age of all the people in this room. It's 50, 55, 60. I said, the average age is about 55, whatever, 60. And everybody is saying that our education system is bad. I said, yes, our education system is bad because you and I have failed as parents, as teachers, as leaders, because we have brought up entire generations without clarity of values. If you take a survey in every class of every school or college and say, how many of you have copied in an exam? You'll get the answer. Maybe 10% will say, no, I've never copied. 80 or 90% will say, we have copied. You know, what is scary is not that they are dishonest. What is really scary is they have grown up to be amoral. They don't think it's wrong. You know why? Because they've seen their parents copying, lying, cheating, paying bribes, taking bribes, not paying taxes, driving on the wrong side and bribing the policeman, and so on and so forth. They've grown up with their parents, seeing their parents doing all this. So, in what way can we blame them? Because they have grown up, the ultimate role models for children are their parents. And when the parents are doing some things, yatha raja tatha praja. And Krishna again says, yad yad acharati shreshtas tad tad devetaro jana sayat pramanam kurute lokas tad anuvartate. What the great men do, what the leaders do in society and in family, the followers and the children will do. So the seniors, I mean, when I say seniors, I mean people in authority, parents, have not inculcated this sense of values in the children. And, you know, our universities, even as late as 1994, 95, I've written to this effect that the university syllabus is some 4 to 5 years or 10 years behind what is needed in the industry. And the universities are obsolete that way. But the real education, I think, as you said, sir, is the necessity for creating this value base amongst children. I know Dr. Mohandas is deeply involved in education, and I know he and his organizations are spending a lot of time and effort trying to inculcate this value base. To me, creating this value base is far more important than giving them knowledge of science and technology, which anyway we will do very quickly. Children will pick up all these things very fast anyway. But inculcating these kinds of value systems becomes the fundamental need of the hour.
Yeah. Any more comments? Any more questions? Otherwise, I think, yeah, it's 5:45, the scheduled time for closure. So thank you, Madhav. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, anyone? Yeah. Who
Can
is
I add one more point? Mohandas.
Yeah, yes, Mohandas, please come in.
So he rightly defined an organization as an organism, because the people who are joined that particular organization, they have a synergy. And you rightly also defined it as the profit as oxygen. I would rather say, probably you did not mention that, but you meant it. The organization itself is the prana. The organization
Yes.
synergy is prana.
Yes,
And profit is only oxygen.
correct. Agree.
So, Madhav, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. I'm seeing you for after a long time. And I'm also seeing the Raja for the, I mean,
Yeah,
after
your voice
Thank
is
you.
breaking.
of 3-4 months.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
I
you
think
all.
I think Mr. Prabhakar Lavkare had a question. I thought I saw him
Prabhakar?
speaking.
Prabhakar? Well, please unmute yourself. Prabhakar, unmute yourself. Can't hear you.
I think his microphone is not working.
Yeah. Can't hear you. Louder. Can't hear you.
Yes, sir. I think Professor Raja, problem with the microphone.
Must be, I think. Sorry about that. I would, of course, welcome Prabhakar and anyone else. I'm sure Madhav would not mind that, writing out. And then we could probably have an online chat or some interaction in the form of chats or correspondence and so on. So with that, I think I must thank Madhav once again for treating us to such a lovely evening, a very, very insightful, a very instructive and inspirational evening for us. May I, are you able to connect, Prabhakar? No.
Sir, can I ask?
Yeah, who is that? Yes, do come in.
I think it is getting unmuted.
No, I
okay.
can hear
Yeah,
you now.
Yeah, okay. My question to Madhav sir is he was telling us something about the sustainability. So can you just elaborate on that sustainability point of view, how the leadership and the sustainability, how the organizations can achieve sustainability by leadership?
Who is this?
Dr. Sangeeta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sangeeta. That's a very interesting question. So look at it this way. It's not enough to post results in one quarter. You have to post results in quarter after quarter, every quarter, all quarters, all the time. It's like a student who's studying in a class. It's not enough if he scores 80% in one monthly test. He has to keep scoring 80 odd percentage in every test, in all the tests throughout his academic year. If he wants to get into, say, companies like Infosys or TCS, or if he wants to uh, get ahead in the marks sweepstakes, not that the marks are everything, but if, if he scores 80 in one exam and then 40 in another and then 50 in another and then 90 in another and then 70, so you see that he's going all over the place. There's no consistency, and when there's no consistency, there's no predictability. If there's no predictability, there's no reliability. If there's no reliability, there's no trust. Therefore, we have to build consistency, reliability, um, in the system. That doesn't come by waving a magic wand and saying abracadabra, let there be reliability and consistency. You have to work at it. First step is that we have to develop leaders. First of all, we must understand what is leadership. And leadership is not occupying a position of authority. Leadership is, a leader is like a gardener who's taking care of a very wonderful garden. Like the Mughal gardens in Rashtrapati Bhavan, how many gardeners are there who are lovingly tending to all the plants and shrubs and trees? They are pruning them, removing the dead wood, and most importantly, removing parasites and weeds. That's the role of a gardener, to creating and nurturing, enabling environment in which all the living beings can grow and achieve their potential. That's leadership. Part of it is succession planning. See, in all our spiritual heritage in the Bhagavatam, king after king after king, after he feels that his son has grown up, has groomed his son, abdicates and goes to the forest to do sannyas. That's succession planning. How many of our people do that? So we have to create, a leader's job is to create other leaders. That's one of the very important aspects of sustainability. And the other thing is to build in hardwire adherence to values and principles in every process which is part of the system. The third thing is to focus on results, not just on performance. So I keep saying you can have performance without results, but you can't have results without performance. So you must create not only results, but you must create the ability to produce results time after time, every time, which means creating an open culture, transparency, trust, training, feedback, communication, relationships, integrating strategy with process, and so on. This is what gives you results quarter after quarter after quarter, not just in one quarter. That's sustainability.
That's one thing. Something I just wanted to clarify in that explanation too. Like, when it comes to leadership, it can be different types of leadership, right? Like participative or autocratic. So, what happens if it is an autocratic leader? So,
So this is a contradiction in terms. An autocrat is not a leader.
Not a true leader.
okay. Thank you.
May occupy a position of authority, but may not be a leader.
A classic case is Alexander Lukashenko in Belarus. Classic example. Currently now suffering, getting a huge blowback from his own people. He's a dictator who's been in power for 24 or 25 years, occupying a position of authority. Autocrat, dictator. not a leader.
Right. Thank you, Madhav. Thank you very much indeed. May I request Sukumar, Reverend Sukumar, to come in, propose a vote of thanks on behalf of all of us? Yes.
On behalf of Ecumenical Christian Center and Atasri, I sincerely express our immense gratitude to the speaker of this webinar, Mr. V.K. Madhav Mohan, for the brilliant and fantastic presentation of the topic, The Hero Within, with the online series of Lecture 2 on the central theme, Leadership in Uncertain Times. In fact, Mr. K.V. Madhav Mohan, with concrete examples, enlightened all of us creatively with a systematic and outstanding demonstration. The beginning of this webinar by Mr. K.V. Madhav Mohan started with a brilliant question related with an internal journey. Who we are inside? Who am I inside? Who are you inside? This webinar was not only just an online webinar, rather it was mind-blowing articulation with an inspirational speech. By listening to today's webinar by Mr. K.V. Madhav Mohan, I'm damn sure that any ordinary person can become extraordinary. A normal person can become a champion. Impossibility can become possibility, especially when we look inside rather than outside. Thank you very much, Mr. K.V. Madhav Mohan, for the positive encouragement to all of us by stating, every human being has infinite capabilities. Infinite is within. Conquer yourself. Look inside. I sincerely salute you for unpacking the story of King Puranjana with the deepest spiritual significance. And the words of St. Augustine are exemplary with exceptionally terrific examples. The example of the beggar and the biscuit tin was magnificent. Thank you very much, Mr. K.V. Madhav Mohan. I would say you are genius. Thanks a lot for exploring tangible examples with the life of Iliud, Alex Hanold, Hanshi Jumpo, Shima Bukuro. I sincerely thank the moderator of this webinar, Professor KCR Raja, a very good friend of Ecumenical Christian Center, for fantastic moderating skills. I also express our deep gratitude with due respect to the brilliant director of the Ecumenical Christian Center, Professor Father Matthew Chandran Kunal, for creating new opportunities for all of us to interact great people like K.V. Madhav Mohan. I also thank our Deputy Director, Tangminlun Wepe, for his amazing and dedicated leadership in Ecumenical Christian Center. I also thank all the participants for your time and passion to listen this amazing and brilliant webinar. I'm again damn sure that you are not the same before and after the presentation. I sincerely thank all of you. Thank you very much for joining with us. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On that note, Minlun, on that note, shall we end the meeting?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Sir,
thank you.
thank you so much. It was really enlightening, sir. It was really inspiring.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you, Madhav.
sir. Madhav Mohan, Raja sir, and
Thank you.
Sukumar and Minlun. Great. See you again.
See you. Yes. See you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.